Where the Stars Do Not Take Sides by Witch of Endor. Chapter 2. Born Again with Each Sunrise. It hurts in ways I can't describe. My heart bends and breaks so many, many times, and is born again with each sunrise. Zuko has no intention to leave with the Avatar. He tells Avatar this on multiple occasions. The first time, Zuko is living in the smallest village he's ever traveled through. He's staying with a family here who need the extra hands around the house after having said goodbye to their older children when they joined the war effort. They have 3 small children, but the father travels and the mother works hard, and so they pay Zuko in room and board and the occasional coins when they're able. Zuko likes this job largely due to 2 factors. He enjoys spending time with the children, who are well-behaved and curious, and he appreciates that their father is rarely around. The last time he took a similar job with the family, the father had thought that Zuko's position in the household, his dependency, came with certain fringe benefits that Zuko had not been amenable to, and it resulted in a somewhat dramatic termination of employment. Of course, Zuko doesn't meet the Avatar and his water-type friends due to Zuko's employment. Zuko meets them when he sneaks out one night masked and armed to address the rumors of what has been recently lurking in the forest nearby. He isn't the only one who's been attracted to these rumors. "Watch out!" he calls when the kid in orange seems to be overwhelmed by the creature's speed. He then kicks himself mentally because "watch out" is helpful. "Hey, over here!" He tries instead charging toward the wisping end of the creature's tail. The thing turns to look at Zuko, or at least Zuko thinks it does. It doesn't technically seem to have eyes. Zuko fights mostly on the defensive, leading the thing away from the kid. He doesn't have much of a plan because he had really only been looking to find out what was happening here, but at least he has his twin swords. It's not going to be enough. Zuko twists away and spins his swords, calling up his fire. That makes the creature falter. "Oh, cool! It doesn't like the fire!" the kid calls out from somewhere above. Zuko glances up and yes, the kid is literally in the trees. "Hey, Katara, I wonder how it feels about water." "On it," a girl's voice calls out, and then the creature is being attacked with fire on one side and water on the other. It starts to cower. Okay, the kid says, gliding. Gliding? Down to the creature. He speaks softly, and Zuko withdraws his fire. "It's okay. We don't want to hurt you," he insists. Zuko's night only gets weirder from there. Once they've calmed the creature down, the kid somehow deduces that the problem is that it's been separated from its family. He looks so devastated by this fact that Zuko somehow finds himself agreeing to spend the night trying to reunite the weird wispy monster with other weird wispy monsters in the forest. The kid flies again, and Zuko blinks up at him, but apparently the fact that the kid thinks he knows which direction to go in is more important than the fact that... Is he an airbender? Well, at least it's going to be several long hours before the kids wake up. "So what's your name?" the kid asks cheerily as they lead the creature through the woods, lit only with the fire in Zuko's palm. His swords are sheathed behind his back, but Zuko is ready to reach for them at any moment if the creature attacks. "I'm Aang, and that's Katara." He points to the waterbender. "And that's Sokka. They're my friends." Katara has been petting the creature ever since it calmed down. Sokka, clearly the wiser of Aang's friends, is keeping his distance and glaring at the monster clutching one end of a boomerang. "I'm Lee," Zuko replies. "Don't take this the wrong way, but I thought the air mats were all gone." Zuko thought that his great-grandfather had wiped them all out. Once it had been told to him as a positive story of enemies falling. Now, looking at this child in oranges and yellows, it makes Zuko feel a little sick. Aang's cheerful demeanor dissipates like the air leaking from a balloon. "Yeah," he says. "I've heard that too." "But it must be wrong, right? Since you're here?" And then Zuko hears the weirdest story he's ever heard in his life. And Zuko has lived through a few weird stories himself. "And so Katara and I are looking for a waterbending master so that we can learn waterbending together." The Avatar finishes, having regained his energy. Zuko hums. He imagines that Royal Caldera City is abuzz with the news of the return of the Avatar. Of course, news like this reaches tiny Earth Kingdom villages last. He hopes that having an avatar setting here doesn't mean that anyone will come through seeking information. Zuko might have to move on quicker than he'd anticipated. Are you going to take your mask off at some point? Sokka asks, clearly irritated by just about everything. The creature is now nuzzling its face against Katara as they walk, and Sokka seems to be alternating between where he looks at the creature and where he looks at Zuko. Sokka! Katara scolds him. If Lee doesn't want to take his mask off, he doesn't have to. Don't get me wrong, the whole two swords thing is impressive, but it is weird following a guy into the woods at night when he's that good with two swords at once, and is wearing a theater mask, and is a firebender. So that's the problem. Removing my mask won't stop me from being a firebender, Zuko points out. Well, Sokka argues, crossing his arms and glowering over at Zuko. It'll at least make you seem human. Zuko hesitates. People in the village don't know I'm a firebender, he explains. That's why I wear the mask. I usually try not to bend at all, but... Hey, it's okay, Aang insists. We won't tell anyone. Zuko hesitates and then decides that the literal avatar has more important things going on than blowing Zuko's cover. He uses the hand that isn't holding their light to remove his mask. Hush falls around them. Zuko assumes that it's because of the scar. It isn't exactly settled, not even in the relative dim light of the firelight. Zuko never explains the scar, but he knows the conclusions that people come to. That he's a war orphan, wrapped up somehow in the wrongs of the Fire Nation. They know that he must be at least part Fire Nation, even with an Earth Kingdom name like Lee. His eyes are too golden for anything else. They think he's a child who is damaged and alone because of the war. And Zuko lets them assume because it's easier for him and because, well, in a way it's kind of true. Zuko looks up at Aang only to find, quite unexpectedly, that he's beaming. It's nice to meet you, Lee the Firebender, he says, dipping into a bow. Shall we get Smokey back to his family? I don't think it's far now. Zuko nods and then intends a glance back to the water-tribe bear before moving on. However, what he finds is Katara frowning over at Sokka, and Sokka staring at Zuko with wide eyes and a slightly slack jaw. Zuko's heart jumps. He's been led into a false sense of security by Aang's lack of overreaction to the scar, he realizes. Zuko ducks his head, letting his hair fall a little in front of his face, and turns to follow Aang further into the forest. Behind him, he hears Sokka cough awkwardly, and Katara stifle a laugh. Zuko is long past being humiliated by people's reactions to his face. He knows this reaction, and he barely even blames Sokka for it. But somehow, it still smarts a little, every time. The Avatar is right about the creature. They watch it dance with its much larger, even scarier parents and disappear into the darkness. Aang is delighted. Everyone else is hungry and tired. Zuko accompanies them back toward the village, donning his mask as they come close to the edges. Hey, do you want to have breakfast with us? Katara asks, smiling over at him. Agni will be showing his face soon. Light is filtering into the world. Zuko shakes his head. I need to get back to the family I'm staying with, he explains. Not your family? Sokka asks. He seems less annoyed than earlier. Zuko isn't sure if it's the fact that he's now seen Zuko's face, or just that they don't have a rabid forest monster following them. I work for them, Zuko explains. Part of the job is being there when the kids wake up. No offense, but why is someone who can do that with two swords at once looking after someone else's kids? Sokka asks. And on top of that, you can, Zuko bristles. What, I can fight so I can't look after children? He asks. Or because I can firebend, I'm too dangerous to be around them. What? Sokka asks, wide-eyed. Whoa, buddy, no! I just meant, He rubs at the back of his neck, clearly at a loss. Aang, little help. Aang turns around so that he's walking backwards and smiling at them, and then immediately trips over a branch. After righting himself, he opts to walk beside Zuko instead. I think what Sokka means is that, you're a firebender, and I'm the Avatar, and I need to master all of the elements to restore balance to the world, and, you know what's been happening with the Fire Nation for the last 100 years. And you can really fight. Like with those swords, you were all... Aang swishes his arms through the air, making whoosh sounds. And then you started bending fire from your swords, and it was all... I think what my brother and Aang are trying to say, Katara interrupts, is that you should consider coming with us. Zuko frowns and then realizes that they can't read his expression from behind the mask. Come with you where? To the North Pole, Aang replies, and then wherever we go afterwards. You can teach me firebending. I can't teach you firebending, Zuko replies, sharp and immediate. After a moment, he clarifies. I'm hardly trained myself. I barely remember anything. I'm a firebender, but I'm not a good firebender.
Sokka clears his throat. That's not what it looked like to me.
Zuko's frown deepens. Well, you're wrong. Look, my fire has gotten a lot stronger, but I don't know anything about it. I barely remember the katas from when I was a kid. I've hardly mastered the basics, let alone enough to teach you. You need a master.
Oh!
Aang says, excited again. Then we'll find a master for both of us, like what Katara and I are doing. We'll learn together. No, Zuko replies. There's a pause among the group. Somewhere along the way, they've stopped walking. The edge of the forest is in sight now. Zuko can see the village, just barely in the distance.
But you're the first firebender we've met who's a good guy!
Sokka bursts. Zuko crosses his arms. You don't know that I'm a good person. You don't know anything about me, he points out. And if you keep throwing yourselves at firebenders on a whim, then you're going to end up getting burned.
Sokka draws a breath to argue, and Aang is still frowning, but it's
Katara who speaks. Guys, we can't force him to come with us, she points out. Then she turns to smile at Zuko. It was nice to meet you, Lee. Don't worry, we'll keep your secret, and thank you for your help. Zuko nods and then bows with a sign of the flame. It's not something he's done for a long time. I wish you luck on your journey, he says. Zuko has been running for years, more or less since he left the Fire Nation, aside from those long months in which Mother was sick and Zuko was too frightened to move her. He's not running toward anything. He's not naive enough to think that there's an end to his restless movement. Stopping means that people get to know you. People getting to know you means that they are more likely to learn about you. And learning about Zuko is dangerous for everyone. And so he keeps running. He doesn't think he's running away from anything specific. He doesn't think that anyone is looking for him, really. If they were, they would have found him in those still months with Mother. But even if he isn't running toward or away from anything, Zuko knows that he can't stop. The second time that Zuko says no doesn't stick. It's many moons later. Zuko has left the small village for a small town. He's working for a stern man now who has hired him to do the grunt work of building a stone wall between him and his neighbors. Zuko is literate enough to read plans and strong enough to carry them out, which makes him perfect for the job. It's hard, slow work, and Ling doesn't offer Zuko a roof over his head, so Zuko is sleeping under the stars at the back of Ling's property. But Ling does offer 2 hot meals a day, and there's a river nearby to bathe in, so it isn't the worst work Zuko has done. It's certainly not the worst work that Zuko has been offered. The Avatar finds him working and bounds over on 2 late feet. Zuko glances over a particularly heavy foundation stone in his arms. No, he says, immediate and firm. Aang pouts. But I didn't ask you anything. They've increased by 1 person. There's a new girl with him, and she really is just a girl. But the Avatar is also a child, Zuko supposes. There's only one reason you would have tracked me down, Zuko replies, turning away from the group and setting the stone in its place. I'm not teaching you firebending. The kids miss you, Katara says in greeting. Surprised, Zuko turns around to face her. We went back to the village where we met you, and we met the family you were staying with. They spoke highly of you. The corner of Zuko's mouth pulls up. They're all good? He asks, and is pleased when Katara nods. He likes Ryu, Chin, and Kuvi. The months with them had been pleasant, and Zuko had been blessed to witness Ryu's first steps. Why didn't you stay with them? Aang asks, curious. Zuko's eyes shift over to the girl. You're new, he points out.
I'm tough, the girl says, shoulders squared. I'm Aang's earthbending teacher.
Sokka clears his throat, and when Zuko looks over, it's to be met with an honest and friendly smile.
Hi, Lee,
he says, and Zuko nods in response.
We're not here to cause any trouble. You said no, and we respect that. We're just looking for a favor. Zuko listens. It turns out that the Avatar has somehow managed to frighten himself away from the idea of firebending. He'd hurt Katara when he'd tried and then gone into a snit and decided that he was never firebending again. They'd managed to coax Aang into the idea of trying again someday by using Zuko as bait, which is problematic because Zuko doesn't want to be bait. After listening, Zuko glares back at his wall. If he doesn't build, he doesn't eat. I'm busy, he answers, even if I wanted to help you, which I don't.
Toph raises an eyebrow.
Either my feet are lying to me, or you're busy with literally putting stones in a line.
I'm building a wall,
Zuko says, which is obvious, and then,
wait, what about your feet?
Which leads to a much more interesting story. Zuko is so entranced by Toph's explanation of her earthbending skills that he barely even blinks when she stamps her feet and brings all the stones into a pile.
Yeah, that's not how building a wall works,
Zuko points out.
Could you put those back, please?
And this leads to the Avatar and his friends helping to build the wall. With Toph's bending, it barely takes any time at all. She might not be much of an engineer, but she takes direction well, and the foundation stones don't hurt her back to move. They get to where Zuko hoped to be by the end of the day in minutes, and Zuko stops her.
We can finish the whole wall, Toph suggests, happily. Zuko crosses his arms. No thanks, he says, trying not to sound too stiff.
Apparently, it doesn't help.
It's no problem, Sokka says from where he's been leading them through the plans. He's taken the lead with a plump. When we're done, we'll have you alter ourselves. Zuko scowls. He hadn't intended to spend any particular time with the Avatar, and now he owes the Avatar, and we'll have to teach him something after all. And they want to finish the wall! Zuko takes a calming breath. I'm paid by the day, he goes with, because
you're literally taking meals out of my mouth is a little too revealing.
I don't want to finish the wall right now, but I can leave early today since we've reached my goal.
So you're going to teach me firebending?
Aang asks, beaming up at Zuko from where he's been spreading mortar. Zuko would like to say no, but he's apparently been too stupid to realize that they've backed him into a corner of that. I will help you to regain your confidence, he allows. The others cheer, and Zuko wonders what he's in for. Aang is really jittery about fire. Zuko has him work on his breathing for a while, but Aang is also an intense ball of breathing energy, and he does not like focusing or apparently breathing. Fire is different to the other elements, Zuko explains, sitting cross-legged and mirrored by Aang. They've set up near where the Avatar and his friends are making camp. There's a giant flying bison napping across the way from them, which Zuko has had to sit facing away from because it's a flying bison, and there is no way he won't get distracted. They've also had to specify a lemur sitter because Aang's pet wants to interrupt them. At some point, the rest of the team are bored of watching Aang and Zuko breathe. But now that Zuko is speaking again, they're regathering. Zuko does not appreciate the audience. Because it's more dangerous? Aang asks, nervous. Fire can be dangerous, Zuko agrees, but it's also life. It's the sun. It gives us food and heat. There are trees that need the fire in order to grow to their true potential. That's beautiful, Aang says, staring up at Zuko with wide eyes. Zuko calls the tiniest flame to his palm and holds it out between them. Fire is different to the other elements because it lives inside us. When you airbend, you're using the air around you. When Katara water bends, she needs a source of water. When Toph earth bends, you see where I'm going. But the fire is inside you. The flame grows and falls with Zuko's breaths for a moment, and Aang goes wide-eyed as he realizes what is happening. It means that it's more connected to you, but it also means that you have to know it. You have to be able to locate your flame and control it. Aang sits back and looks grumpy. And that's why I have to breathe. Zuko nods and then talks Aang through feeling the sun. He talks about how firebenders can feel when the sun rises even if they can't see it. He thinks that he's grasping at phrases from his teachers, maybe even from his uncle, but it's all he knows to teach. Aang listens patiently and then closes his eyes and breathes with Zuko. It's a long time before Zuko holds his flame out again. I don't want you to call your own fire yet, he says. You need to work up to that. But you can also connect to alien fires. I want you to focus on my flame because I can control it if anything goes wrong. Aang looks nervous again and Zuko tries for a comforting smile. He isn't sure that he pulls it off. This is safe. I'm in control, okay? Aang frowns and then shuffles forward to sit closer to Zuko. Okay, I trust you, Lee. The Avatar breathes, and eventually, Zuko's flame starts to match Aang's breaths. By the time evening falls, Zuko realizes that he's missed his meal. Ling runs on a tight schedule, and Zuko knows that if he isn't there for the meal isn't served to him. There are no holdovers in Ling's universe. He's not eating tonight. Maybe Ling will be kind and one of tomorrow's meals can be breakfast. It would help with the energy. I need to be heading back, Zuko says. Sokka has apparently released the winged lemur, who is now chittering away at Zuko while flying around him in circles. I hope this was helpful, Aang. I wish you all the best on your journeys. He bows to each of them, but is stopped by a flailing Aang. Wait, we're not done yet! I can't even connect to my own fire! Zuko turns back. I told you that I would help you overcome your nerves, he explains. You're less nervous, but you're going to need an actual master to teach you. But you clearly know what you're talking about. You did all those breathing exercises. I'm not a good enough firebender to be your master, Aang, Zuko says, voice firm. Sokka leans toward Toph and says in a voice that is nowhere near a whisper. When we first met him, he was firebending with two swords at once to stop a scary forest smoke monster. Have you ever heard of someone firebending with two swords at once? I wasn't aware that firebending with one sword was even a thing, Snoozles, Toph replies. Zuko frowns. That's because it's not a thing, he explains. I made it up because sometimes sword fighting isn't enough, and I'm not enough of a firebender to fight effectively that way. Sokka holds his hands out in clear astonishment. He made up fire sword bending stuff because he's not a good firebender. Really unimpressive, Toph replies. Zuko sighs wearily in his attempt to look at something that isn't the two of them focusing inappropriate attention on his firebending skills in order to manipulate him into helping. Zuko's eyes fall to Katara. She's cooking something in a pot over the small campfire, but her fire seems to be waning, and she's trying to fix that through rearranging the firewood. Zuko clears his throat and then offers her fire from his palm, pulling the flames higher. Katara smiles up at him. Thanks, Lee, she says, because unlike her brother and friends, she doesn't seem interested in strong-arming him. Would you like to have dinner with us? Zuko's stomach literally rumbles. Zuko scowls while Katara chuckles. But if Zuko stays, then Zuko owes them again. He thinks about how hungry he's been. The meals from Ling are keeping him going, but the work has been hard and the days have been long. And then Zuko does the math. Even if he does help Aang tomorrow, he'll need them to help with the wall first. The wall and the training are the transaction. The food pushes him over the edge. He'll owe them something unspecified. No, thank you, he replies. I have dinner from Ling in payment for the wall. He goes to bow again, but is interrupted by Toph. Well, that's a weird thing to lie about. Zuko hesitates. Everyone else looks up at him. Excuse me? Oh, right, Sokka says, looking awkward. Toph can sort of tell when people are lying through her feet. Toph lifts one foot from where she's sitting on the ground and wiggles it. I can feel heartbeats, she says. And yours is like kind of too fast all the time anyway, but you definitely picked up there. So what, no dinner from the boss, but you're also too good to eat with us? Zuko grits his teeth. They want him to be indebted tonight because it ensures tomorrow. Maybe they intend to keep him off balance this way to corner him into training the Avatar. I'm fine, Zuko forces out. Good night. He turns and leaves swiftly, ignoring Toph's declaration of, yeah, so he's not fine. Zuko is done here, and he should get back to his stuff to ensure that nothing has happened to it while he's been away. He doesn't mind sleeping on Ling's land, but Zuko does wish he had somewhere safer to keep his few meager possessions. Hey, Lee! Zuko hears behind him, and he sighs before turning around. Damn his manners. Wait up! It's Sokka, and he's holding a bowl of food. Zuko frowns. What do you want? Sokka holds out the food. As a thank you, he says. I know you don't want to eat with us. That's okay. You're private. We're a lot. I get it. But if we made you miss your meal or something, then we kind of owe you this. Zuko blinks at the bowl, and then up at Sokka. Is that right? Do they owe him dinner because they kept him from Ling's meal? Or is this a trick? Wary, Zuko reaches out and takes the bowl. Sokka smiles at him, bright and wide, and for some reason Zuko's eyes really like Sokka's smile. He finds himself starting to smile back before he catches it and reverts to a neutral expression. Okay, Zuko says. If you owe it to me, then I'll eat with you. Sokka's smile grows even brighter, and Zuko finds himself unable to look away until Sokka goes to lead them back. The team around the fire doesn't question Zuko's reappearance. Zuko assumes that they were of a mind with a debt and sits cross-legged by the fire. So, Lee, Toph greets him from where she has been shoveling food into her mouth. Which is it? War orphan or runaway? Zuko didn't think he would regret returning quite so abruptly. Toph! Katara scolded her. What? Toph asks. I'm just asking because he's a firebender in the Earth Kingdom, and also a kid who apparently does whatever job is offered to him for a meal. He's obviously either a war orphan or a runaway because he's Fire Nation and he's here. She gestures with her chopsticks and then goes back to eating. Aang frowns at her. He could just be half Earth Kingdom and half Fire Nation, he points out as if Zuko isn't right here. Toph snorts. Not if Sokka's description of his golden eyes are true, she says. Toph! Sokka cries, horrified. What? Toph asks. Why is everyone always yelling at me? Because you're a menace, Sokka shouts. I didn't say... I was just describing you to her because she never met you, that's all, he assures Zuko. Zuko watches this play out with a deep-seated sense of confusion. Obviously, Katara interjects, her voice careful and sweet. Toph needed to know about exactly what Lee looks like to understand why we were looking for him. It would help with the search, Sokka defends himself. And it was for texture, so that Toph knows, because she can't see him for herself. And Toph knows so much about what gold looks like, Aang adds, snickering. Zuko eats and watches and is confused. He doesn't understand the significance of Sokka's apparent misstep, and he also doesn't understand how these friendships work. But then again, he hasn't had a real friend since he was 11, so he's probably just rusty. Thankfully, the conversation leaves the topic of Zuko's eyes, and the group eventually decide to tell Zuko stories of their adventures. Once Zuko has finished eating, the winged lemur curls up on his lap. Zuko scratches at the lemur's fur while he listens, and the creature snuggles into him to nap. Since war stories are always months behind in backwater towns like this, Zuko is far behind on the news. Honestly, it's probably one of the best evenings of Zuko's life. He mostly just listens to stories and avoids telling his own, but social interactions are usually more work-focused for Zuko, and so it's kind of nice to hear stories. By the time Zuko leaves, he doesn't even mind the idea that they might come and help with the wall tomorrow. They do turn up again, but it's before lunchtime. Zuko shifts uncomfortable and tries to work through the dilemma in his head. If they finish the wall before lunch and want to leave, Zuko should follow them because he owes them the teaching time. But then Zuko doesn't get lunch unless they offer it, and Zuko doesn't know if they'll owe him the meal again or if Zuko will be in more debt. If they don't finish the wall before Ling decides it's time for lunch, then does Zuko let them keep working while he eats? But then Zuko isn't really earning his meal in the first place. Sparky, you okay? Toph asks. Zuko ignores her and tries to parse this out. Can he ask them to come back later? But what if they want the extra hours with Aang? Whoa, seriously, what is your heart doing? Sorry, Zuko says, and he is pretty sure that he's never had to apologize for his heartbeat before. I'm just trying to figure out how today works. The whole group is looking at him, clearly confused. Like, yesterday? Sokka suggests. You arrived after lunch yesterday. Zuko corrects him and then decides that transparency is the only way around this. But it's a few hours until lunch now, and if I leave early, I won't get to eat. That's what you're freaking out about? Toph asks. Yikes, Lee! Just eat lunch with us! The boys nod, happy with Toph's conclusion, but Katara's eyes are narrow. Why are you so concerned about the meal thing? You were like this last night, too. It doesn't carry over, Zuko explains. If I don't work the day, then Ling will stop asking me to work. but the meals don't carry over to the next day. When Katara continues to look confused, he adds, "So I would be working for nothing, I guess?"
Something clears on her face. "Is that all he gives you?" she asks, incredulous. "You do all this work just to eat and sleep in his house?"
"I don't sleep in his house," Zuko replies automatically and then abruptly realizes his mistake. Katara looks furious.
"Lee, this is a lot of hard work to be doing just to be fed," she exclaims. Just eat with us. You can sleep at our camp too, if you're already sleeping outside."
Zuko shakes his head. "You'll leave in a day or two. The wall will take me a week at least, and Lang might ask me to do something else afterwards." "Okay then, crazy idea," Sokka says, pointing at Zuko. "You just come with us."
"Sokka,"
Katara says, quiet and careful. Zuko scowls. "I'm not going to be manipulated into joining the war effort through promises of food," he says as carefully as he can manage. He is very carefully not shouting. Ling's neighbors might not be visible right now, but that doesn't mean they won't hear him shouting about firebending. "If it was that easy, I would have signed up as a soldier."
"Lee, I don't think Sokka meant it like that,"
Aang says.
"It just seems like a bad deal. You should be paid something real for work like this."
"There isn't money in places like this," Zuko responds. "When people pay me in food, it's because that's what they can afford. And if you want to help that, then..." Zuko sighs, realizing where his own train of thought has brought him. "Then end the war and let the Earth Kingdom stop starving." Zuko pinches the bridge of his nose. Aang clears his throat. "Did you just talk yourself into helping me?" "Let's build the next section of this wall," Zuko says. "Then I'm taking a break for lunch. Then I will help you with your fire one last time." Of course, that's where everything goes wrong. They reconvene at the Avatar's camp for long hours of firebending practice. By the end of it, Aang is happily cupping his own fire. As per Zuko's instructions, Aang keeps it the size of his smallest fingernail, and he's eventually able to match it to his breathing. And then Aang is distracted by the river and ideas about waterbending, and he and Katara end up standing on the edge of the water and practicing. "Is this how practice works for him?" Zuko asks Sokka. "He gets distracted by another element and then just wanders off?" Sokka looks thoughtful for a moment and then nods. "Yeah, pretty much," he admits. Then he elbows Zuko lightly and Zuko flinches away. "You're good with him," Sokka says, smoothly adding a bit of distance between them. Zuko relaxes. "You're patient." "I worked with kids, remember?"
"Don't let him hear you compare firebending training to babysitting," Toph suggests.
Zuko nods, watching the waterbending, and then realizes that this break might be a good opportunity to wash. "Hey, do you have any soap?" he asks. "I could pay you back for it." He leans over his own bags, grateful that he's thought to bring his things today. It's safer this way, and now he has a copper coin to offer in exchange for soap. "Sure," Sokka says and wanders over to their bags. "But you don't have to pay us, it isn't a big deal." Zuko's stomach clenches at that, because if they won't take the coin, they might ask for something else. But he makes himself ignore it for now, because Sokka is already holding out the soap, and Zuko is really ready for a dip in the river while the day is warm. "Thanks," he says, taking the soap, and then strips down to his underwear. He isn't expecting the commotion, but Toph suddenly turns and holds her arms out. "Whoa, are we being attacked?" When she doesn't get a response, she grins wickedly. "Oh no, I figured an attack was all that could explain Sokka's heart rate." Katara and Aang giggle while sloshing back down into the river, and Sokka glares. "Toph!" he complains, and Zuko resolves to ignore whatever is happening here and jump into the river. It's not ideal to wash with his underwear still on, but it's hot enough today that they'll dry before long anyway. And it feels good to be able to bathe during the day with Agni smiling down upon him. Zuko works the soap through his hair and then over his skin, tuning out the arguments and laughter in the camp. It's kind of pleasant. Later, when he's dry and dressed again, he convinces Aang to return to their breathing exercises. Zuko thinks that he can probably get Aang playing with the fire a little more by the end of the day, and that should break through Aang's nerves. He'll be primed well to find a master, Zuko's almost sure of it. Which is when they are actually attacked. Toph grumbles through the whole thing, which makes it a slightly surreal experience, but they go from being calm to running from fire almost ridiculously quickly. The team is clearly somewhat used to this. They take their stances and fight back, and Zuko uses the cover of their stances to dive for his bag, pulling out his twin broadswords. Zuko notices that the team ends up quickly on the defensive. "How did you even find us?" Zuko shouts. "How do you always find us?"
"I guess you're just not as good at running as you thought you were,"
the firebender replies. Zuko stands with his swords in hand and spins into an offensive position. They fight. For long moments, all Zuko can see is fire and water and earth and air, and then he realizes that he's seeing two colors of fire. His own is its usual reds and oranges and yellows, but when the firebender first bends, before anything catches with flame, her fire is blue. Zuko's heart drops and he stops for long enough to try to get a look at her face. Their eyes meet. Her hands freeze in midair halfway through an attack as she stares at Zuko. And Zuko stares back because there's no way that he would ever mistake that face for anyone else. It's practically Zuko's face, after all, practically their mother's. The air hangs still between them. Azula's eyes are wide, and Zuko knows that they must be perfect mirrors of one another. Zuko's heart is in his throat. It feels like the bottom has fallen out of the world and he's floating, or falling and waiting to hit the ground. Azula lets out a breath, and it must be quiet in the roar of the flames, but Zuko hears it clearly. And he knows that she knows. Toph stamps her feet, and the earth rushes up to push Azula back. The moment is broken, and Azula flees as sudden and violent as she'd shown up. The world grays out. Zuko drops his swords. "Whoa!" Sokka says, slotting himself under Zuko's arms. "Are you okay, man? Lee, can you hear me?" "I need to sit down," Zuko hears himself saying, but his lips are numb and he doesn't remember deciding to sit down. Sokka lowers him to the ground and Zuko tunes out the noise, focusing on his own breathing. In and out. There's no going back. This is broken now. This life is broken. Azula knows where he is, what he looks like now, and that he is fighting with the Avatar, which means that Ozai knows. And it might not be entirely true. His fighting might have only been a consequence of chance, but that doesn't matter. He survived the last 5 years by the grace of the Fire Lord. It is a kindness not to hunt him down. That kindness has reached an end. When Zuko comes back to himself, he's lying on his side, and Sokka is sitting in front of him and jattering away. Momo, the winged lemur, is curled up in Zuko's elbow, also jattering away. As far as Zuko can tell, neither of them is saying anything of any substance. Zuko pushes himself up to sitting. "Lee!" the Avatar breathes, rushing over to them. "I'm so sorry, Lee. You said you didn't want to have anything to do with this fight, and Azula..." "Is she hunting you?" Zuko asks, because it's suddenly very important. Aang blinks. "Yeah," he says. "She's been trying to bring me to the Fire Lord, I guess to imprison me, since killing me will just mean another Avatar. Oh, she's the Fire Princess." "And she is the scariest person you'll ever meet," Sokka adds. "So the good news is that it's all uphill from here?" Zuko blinks at Sokka, who looks drawn and worried. "I'm sorry I panicked," he says, because he thinks that might be important too. "I just wasn't expecting that." He's careful to tell the truth now that he knows about Toph. Or, well, he's careful to avoid lying. Sokka reaches over as if he's about to touch Zuko's shoulder, and then clearly changes his mind and leaves his hand hanging awkwardly. "No, it's okay. We understand." He swallows. "She's pretty terrifying." Zuko nods. The Avatar is being hunted by the Fire Nation. Zuko is being hunted by the Fire Nation. It suddenly seems much simpler than before. "I think Ling is going to have to find someone else to finish that wall." Sokka looks confused, but Aang is beaming. "Sifu Lee, it's an honor to have you join us," he says, and bows. Zuko's brain is still working slowly after his momentary panic, and so he's still looking at Sokka while Aang bows. Which means that while Katara and Toph join in their welcomes in the background, Zuko finds himself watching a slow smile dawn over Sokka's face. "Welcome to the team, Lee,"